Hello, everyone. First of all, I would like to thank everybody for joining the second part of this particular series. In the previous session, we discussed about the architecture of the Spark briefly, and we discussed about the internals of the RDD, how uh, it works, and the lazy behavior of the Spark. In this particular session, we'll focus more on the Spark SQL API, which is meant to be for the structured analysis of the data or the data analysis for the structured data. Okay, so first of all, I will start with some of the key points so that we have a little understanding of the terms what we will talking about. Okay, so the first is the data frame. If I talk about the data frame is nothing but a relational representation or very similar to your relational table. It's a tabular representation of our data. The second term which we would like to know is Spark SQL. Spark SQL is another module provided by Spark for structured data analysis. And then the last one is the Spark session. Spark session is the entry point of our Spark application. Okay, so these are some of the bits which I would like to share at the beginning of the session. Now, in this particular session, just to make things clear, what we will do is we will discuss what exactly the data frame is, how we can construct the data frame, what are the different operations we can perform on the data frames, and then as we discussed in the last session that Spark won't store any data. So what are the different storage we can use with the Spark to store the data or to read the data as well. So we will discuss about Hive, Parquet, CSV, and quite a few more. And also at the end of the session, I will share some more content so that if you're interested, you can deep a little more deeper into this. Okay. And what I'm using at the moment is I'm using the GCP infrastructure. I'm using the Dataproc, and within the Dataproc, they have provided the Jupyter Notebook. So I'm using the Jupyter Notebook. And I mean, just to give you a little hint about that Dataproc. So here I'm running on my Google Cloud Platform. So this is my Dataproc cluster. And just to give you a bit of hint, so it's a very small cluster I have created with one master and the two workers. And if I go to the web interfaces, they provide quite a few web interfaces. For example, so I'm using Jupyter Notebooks. If you're interested, you can use the Zeppelin notebook as well, or you can use the Spark shell or the other ways to run the Spark jobs. Okay, now let's get started. So first of all, what I will do is I will load the libraries which is required. So Spark session, because we're going to create the Spark session, and that is the entry point of our Spark functions. This contains a lot of different functions which is available with the Spark SQL, and these are some of the types which we're going to use at some point of time. So I'm just importing some of the libraries which will be required. And here, what I'm doing is I'm just creating a Spark session so that we can use that Spark session because that is the entry point of our Spark application. Now here, I'm just enabling one flag. This has, this is specific to the Jupyter Notebook. What it will do is it will eagerly evaluate my data frames. And why I'm using this, I mean, just for the display purpose, because instead of using the Spark's native display, I would like to use the Jupyter display, which is a bit more nicer. I will show you the difference in a bit. And I mean, that is the reason I'm just enabling this flag. Now, let's quickly get started with creating a data frame. So here, what I'm doing is I'm using the Python API. We can also call it as a PySpark. So I'm using a list of tuples, and let's say the name of the list is EMP, and then here the name of the list is DPT. And what we are doing is we are trying to create a data frame out of this. So how we can create a data frame? This is Spark session. Then we can say create data frame. We have provided the name of the columns which we would like to name it. And so we have created two data frames. One is the EMPDF and another one is the department DF. So let me show you the content of the EMPDF and show you how it looks like. So this is how the content of this EMPDF data frame looks like. Now, as I said, this is the display of Jupyter. However, Spark provides the content of the data frame onto the show you. So this is how it looks like.
Sorry to jump in, Neeraj. We're having a few audio issues. I think you're dropping out a little bit. It might be worth, if possible, just to turn your camera off to reduce some of the network load, as it were. And we'll keep an eye on it. Yeah.
Absolutely. I'm just turning off my video, and apologies for that if there's some network issues from my end.
Mate, it's perfect. We can hear you now. So I'll leave you to it and come back at the end.
Okay, great. Thanks, David. So that's what I was talking about when we use the display, native display provided by the Spark with the show function, or we use the display of Jupyter. And if we are using the different notebooks like Zeppelin or the Databricks, so they have their own implementation of displaying the content, but that is just a display of the content. So I'll try to use this because I believe this looks a little more nicer. Okay, so let's proceed. So what we did is, so far we have created a data frame. Let's try to perform simple operations on the data frame. So for example, if we would like to do a count on the data frame just to see how many records do we have in the data frame. So we can do a count. This is a very simple data frame. So our sample data frame. So it has only 10 records. So it will say 10. Now, if I would like to know, explore a bit more about my data frames. So let's say I would like to know how many, what are the columns this data frame contains. So I can say empdf.columns, and that will display the columns, so that even if I want to use these columns programmatically at some point of time, I can do that. Also, so this will only display the name of the columns. Now, what if we would like to have the data type of the columns as well? So you can say D types, and what it will do is it will display the data type of the columns as well. And if we would like to know, because we have created a data frame, we haven't specified any schema, Spark has inferred the schema automatically. So we would like to know how the schema has been stored in Spark. So we have another attribute called as a schema, and this is how the schema of our data frame stored by Spark. Now, what is schema? Schema is collection of attributes. So here you can say this struct type represent your schema, and since the schema is a collection of attribute, your each attribute is represented by a struct field. And if you look at the inside the struct field, it represents the name of the column, the data type of the column, and its nullability. So this struct field represents the first column ID of type integer or long. This second struct field represents the column name of type string, and so on. And if you would like to display the schema in a hierarchical manner, they have another function called as a print schema that will print the schema in a hierarchical manner in a nicer way, so that it will be easy for us to look at the schema. And also this makes more sense when we are working with the hierarchical data, so that you can absolutely see the hierarchy of your data as well. Okay, now let's proceed. Let's talk about some simple operations like selecting a particular columns. So it provides a function called as a select. You can provide the different columns which you would like to select and let's say do a show. So by default, the show function will only display 20 records since we only have 10 records. So it is displaying all. And if we would like to control that, so you can specify the number of records which you would like to display, say 2, and it will display like this. Okay. Now, this is one way of selecting the columns. So here, what we are doing is we are specifying the column as a string. So if you look at this ID, this is nothing but a string. So we have represented our column as a string, but we have different ways to represent the column. Let's look at it one by one. So here in the first case, we are specifying the column as a string as we did earlier, but just for the demonstration, I'll do that again. So you could see we have got the ID column, and since we done the limit 5, we got only 5 records. Okay. Now, instead of specifying the column as a string, what we can do is we can specify the column as a column object as well. So here, what we are doing is we are specifying the column as a column object, and this is how you can represent empdf, and within the square brackets, you can specify the name of the column. And in terms of output, you will still get the same output, but if I try to execute this just to demonstrate the difference, if you look at the type of ID, which was the first case, and you could see that's a string, but this time we have specified empdf ID within the square brackets, and this is the column object. Okay. And there are different ways to specify the column object. So this is another way of specifying the column object. Like this is another way of specifying the column object with the name of the data frame dot column. And there is another way where you can use the call function, which we have imported at the top, and you can specify the name of the column inside it. So there are different ways by which you can specify the columns. Now, what's the difference, or where should we use the different notations? So I'll talk briefly about it. So for example, if you have certain methods, for example, let's say sorting the data in a descending manner. So this particular column class have certain attributes which can help you to do that ordering. Or for that matter, if any other functions or attributes which you would like to use from this particular column class, then definitely you would like to use this representation of the column object, not the string, because string might not have those attributes or the functions available. So that is the difference between when to use the string and the column. Now, let's say within the column, whether should I use for the call function or I should use the other representation. So for that, I'll give you a very small example. So let me try to write something here. So let's say we would like to join the two data frames. The name of the data frame 1 is A and the name of the data frame 2 is B. Okay. Now, if we specify this representation, and let's say we would like to join based on the column, let's say, for example, ID. So if we say something like this, then you could see this is very ambiguous. Although we can represent the column like this, but this is ambiguous. So Spark will not know that to which particular ID column we are representing, because both are same. Instead, so we can't use this notation. Instead, if we do this, then it make more sense. So I'm not going to type, all of it, but just to, okay, let me do that just for. Now, if you try to do this, then we are specifying that, yes, we would like to join A and B, where join on the column ID from the A data frame and the B data frame. So this is just an example on how to select those different representations. But as and when you will work with Spark, you will get to know about these things. Now, let's proceed with the filter. Obviously, even in the filter, you can use any sort of expression. I will not going to go again in the detail of all of these, but you can play around as per your convenience. But what filter will do is, filter is similar to your where clause in the Spark state in your SQL. So it will filter the records. And what's the expression? Give me a records where employee ID is equals to 1. So it will return only the record with the specified condition. If you would like to write multiple conditions with the and or clause, you can use the and or clause to write a very complex expression as well. Okay. Now, let's talk about a few more operations. Let's talk about a few more operations. So let's say drop. So if you would like to drop a particular column, we can say drop and specify a column or a list of columns which we would like to drop. And we need to store this result into a new data frame, because as we discussed in the previous session, RDDs are immutable in nature, and these data frames built on top of RDDs, which means that data frames are also immutable in nature. You cannot change the content of the data frame. So if you look here, we have dropped the column ID. It will return a new data frame which we have stored in a new DF. It doesn't mean that the column is dropped from the EMPDF. If I do a show on the EMPDF, the ID column still there because this is immutable in nature. However, you can transform this using these transformations. Okay. Now, let's talk a bit about the aggregation. So for example, if you would like to do, let's say, grouping, or you would like to do an aggregation, so you can use group by based on any column, let's say department. And then on this particular group data, you can use aggregated function, which is AGG. And inside that, you can perform multiple aggregations all at once. So on this aggregated data based on the department, what we are doing is we're trying to count the salary. So how many records do we have? And then we would like to have the total salary within the department, maximum, minimum, and the average salary of the department. So you could see here for the department 5, we only have one record, which means that we only have one employee in this particular department, where the total salary of the department is 3,400. The maximum is 3,400, minimum is 3,400 because there is only one employee. Look at this one, department 1. It has 4 employees, total salary is 6,600, maximum is 3,000, minimum is 1,000, and so on. So this is how you can do an aggregation. However, if you would like to do an aggregation without grouping, which means that you would like to do an aggregation on the entire data frame, so instead of doing a grouping, you can directly apply the aggregated function, and it will give you the result like this. So it has a 10 employees. This is the total salary. This is the maximum, minimum, and so on. Now, let's talk quickly about sorting of the data. Now, sorting is also an important aspect of the data analysis. So let's say if you would like to sort the data based on the department, and within the department, you would like to sort the data based on the salary. So let's see how it looks like. Now, if you look here, the first column is department. So we have done the sorting based on the department column, which is DEPT 1, 2, and 3, 5. And within the department 1, if you look here, the salary is sorted based on the, the records are sorted based on the salary, because that's the second column. If you would like to do a further sorting, you can keep on adding the columns which you would like to do a sorting. By default, if you look here, the sorting is done in an ascending order. If you would like to do a sorting in a descending order, we can use a DSC function. So here, the first column is department. So the data is still sorted based on the department and in the ascending order, because we haven't provided any descending here. In the second column, the data is sorted based on the salary, but the ordering is descending because we have specified that. So this is how you can play around with the sorting as well. Now, let's say at some point of time, you would like to create a derived column based on some other column. So what you can do is you can use a function called as a with column. Now what this with column takes is the name of the new column. Let's say we would like to give a bonus to our employees, a 10% bonus. So we will create a column named as a bonus, and this will be calculated as 10%, like 0.1 of our salary. So if I execute this, so here we have got the bonus column added, which is the 10% of the salary. And if I look at the columns, obviously we got another column added to our data frame. Okay. Now, let's talk a bit about joins. So how we can join the two data frames. So for example, we have created two data frames, EMPDF and department DF at the top. We would like to join these two data frames. Okay. So, and we would like to join both the data frames based on the ID. So that ID is named as department in the EMPDF, and in the DPTDF, it's named as ID. So we would like to join those based on this. And if we show here, we could see we have joined the two data frames based on these two columns. And this is how it looks like. So the first, what join function will do is it will take the first argument as a second data frame, the second argument as an expression based on which we would like to do a join. Since here we haven't provided any type of join, by default it will perform a inner join. However, if we would like to perform other type of join, let's say left outer, right outer, or outer, we can specify the third argument as left outer, right outer, or outer, as you could see on my screen. So let me do a left outer join. So with the left outer join, so you have some records which is present into the left side of the table. So, and we don't have corresponding ID, so we got null. So this represents the left outer join. Right outer join, we have some records with the data frame 4, department 4 in the department table, but we don't have any record corresponding to employees. So we got null for the left table, and outer join is literally the union of both of them. So you got all the records from the left side of the table and all the records from the right side of the table. Okay, so this is how the join works with the data frames. Okay, now what we are learning or what we are talking about is the Spark SQL APIs, and as we say, it provides the SQL-like capabilities. And so far we have used the data frame API to see different functions like select, filter, with column, join, and so on. What if we would like to write exact SQL query like select star from table name, where, some condition, and so on? How we can do that? For that, what we need to do is we need to register a data frame as, let's say, a temporary view so that we can query that. So what I will do here is EMPDF is my data frame. I will use a function called as a create or replace temp view that will create or replace any temporary view it is created. And I will just name the view as a temp table. Okay. And in the next statement, what I'm doing is I'm executing the SQL query with a SQL function. And if you look at the query, it's like a very simple SQL query. Select star from temp table, because the name of the view is temp underscore table, where ID is equals to 1. This will return a data frame, and I will just do a show just to show you the content. And you could see this time we haven't used the select or the filter function. Instead, we wrote a SQL query and got the result. So you can write the SQL queries as well instead of using the data frame API. Okay, so we got the data frame API and we can write the SQL queries as well. Now, which one I should choose? So there are some pointers which I can say. So for example, if you're already familiar with the SQL, yes, I would suggest to do the SQL, because under the hood, it will create a Spark job for your SQL query, and you will get all the optimization which you can get from the data frame API as well. So in terms of the performance, there is no difference between the two strategies. So when to use what then? In terms of the SQL, you can, if you're already familiar, it makes sense to use the SQL, or if you would like to adopt queries, you can use the SQL queries. However, if you would like to build a large ETL pipelines, if you're an expert in SQL, you can still do that, but that might not be that feasible for you to write or maybe to read for somebody else. At that point of time, we can use the data frame API to build the large ETL pipelines, divide our code into a small chunks, and then tie things together. Because the data frame API will also help you to write the code in a functional manner. So that's some of the observation I would like to share based on my experience. However, in terms of performance, there is no difference between the two modes. Now, so far we discussed how we created a data frame, performed certain operations, and how we can write the SQL queries. But what if we are done with all the operations, all the analysis? What next? We would like to store our data somewhere. Okay. Now let's go a little deep into what are the different data sources which we can use. Let's first talk about Hive. I hope everybody is familiar with Hive. So first of all, what I will do is so I'm already in my Hive shell on my cluster, and I will show you some of the tables which are present onto my Hive. So these are some of the tables which I have created just for the demonstration purpose. And let me just write a very simple query. And let's say limit 5. Okay, so what this will do is this will display the content of this customer table, and it will only display 5 records. So yeah, behind the scene it is creating a job, and yeah, it will display the data. So this is how my data frame looks like, and this is in Hive. Okay, but how we can read that Hive table into Spark and get the data frame. So name of the table is customer, and we have a function called as a table which read the Hive table. So we specify the name of the table, and here, since this is a large Hive table, what I'm doing is I'm just sorting the data based on some column and do a limit 10. Why I'm doing a sorting? So that every time when I run, I only get the top 10 records. That's the only reason I'm doing the sorting. So let me execute this, and okay, so this is how my data frame looks like. Okay, and obviously this is exactly same what we have seen on the Hive console. Now we have read the Hive table, got the data frame. Now once we got the data frame in Spark, we can do as much transformations as possible, whatever we want to do in Spark, as we discussed some of them on the top. But when we are done with the transformation, what we need to do is we need to save the Hive table. So how we can save the Hive table? So how we can save the data frame? So let's say name of the data frame is customer, then we can say dot write and dot save as table. Inside that, we specify the name of the table which we would like to save, and we can specify various modes like whether to overwrite, append, or few other modes. So let's try to do this. Now we have saved our Hive table. Now earlier, if you look here, we only have 3 tables: customer, date, dim, or store sales. Or in other words, we don't have any table named as a customer underscore 10. Let me do show tables now, and you could see now we have got another Hive table, customer underscore 10. Okay, so that's just a demonstration from the Hive console. However, if I would like to check, I can check from here as well by running some meta commands. So if I execute this for the customer 10, you could see we have created this table. So a couple of things I would like to mention. Created time, it's literally just now we have created in UTC time zone. And another important point is type managed. So there are different type of Hive tables. One is managed Hive table, one is the external Hive table. And the major difference is when you delete the Hive table, when you delete the managed Hive table, your data will be deleted. With respect to the external table, it's only the metadata which will be deleted. So I'll not go deeper into the Hive table concept, but just to demonstrate, if you don't specify anything, your data frame will be stored as a managed Hive table. Okay. Now, what if we would like to save our Hive table as a partition Hive table? So what you need to do is you just need to specify another clause partition by and specify the partition column. Okay. So this has been saved. Now let's check the metadata for this particular Hive table. And here you could see we have this partitioning information because we have saved this particular Hive table as a partition Hive table, and we did the partitioning based on the year column. Okay, so this is how we can say, I mean, we have saved our Hive table as a partition Hive table. Now, if we would like to check the partitions of that Hive table, so there is another metadata command, show partitions, name of the table, and you could see the partitions here. If we try to execute the same partition command for the previous Hive table, which is not partitioned, then we will get an error because this is not partitioned. So it will say show partition is not allowed on a table that is not partitioned. Okay, because the previous table, the first table, we haven't saved as a partition table. So this is how you can save your data as a partition table. And if you want, you can check quickly from here. Now, what if you would like to save your data frame as a Hive table? So you just need to provide another argument named as a path and location where you would like to save or store your data. If you do this, what it will do is it will store your data frame as an external table. Now, once this will be done, I will again run the metadata command and I will show you that just to demonstrate, just for the demonstration that this is an external table. So if I now look here on the type, it's external, which earlier it used to be managed. So by default, when you save your data frame, it will be a managed table. If you would like to store as external table, you can specify the path at which you would like to save your data, and it will create an external table. So this is how you can work with the Hive table, read the data from the Hive table and store as a Hive table, either manage as external table or a partition or a non-partition table. Okay. Now, let me quickly show you how we can read the CSV file, create a data frame, and once you got the data frame, you can pretty much do the whatever you want to do. And again, you can store your data frame either as a Hive table, CSV file, or any other formats which we're going to discuss. But let's see how it works. So Spark is the Spark session.read.csv. And inside the CSV, we specify the location where the CSV file is, what's the separator, or if it has any header or not. And we have created a data frame, but before I would like to display the content of the data frame, I would like to display the schema. If you look here, all the columns are string. However, we were expecting some of the columns as, let's say, integer or with some other format, but here everything is string, because when you read the data from the CSV, it will read all the columns as a string. So how to get the schema? So there is an attribute called as an infer schema. There is an argument called as an infer schema, which by default is false. You need to say this is a true. And once you say this is true, this will infer the schema automatically. And you could see now we have got the data type thing sorted out, and we have got the correct schema inferred by Spark. Okay. So this is how you can read the CSV file as well. Now, what if after you have done everything and you would like to save your data frame as a CSV file? So you can say your data frame, I mean limit, because I just would like to create a small CSV file, then say write and .csv, and then specify the path of the CSV separator if you would like to provide. So I'm providing pipe. By default, it will be a comma. Header, if you would like to create an header. Mode, if you would like to overwrite your CSV append or anything else. So if you do this, what this will do is this will create a CSV file, at this particular location. Now, if we are interested in more options for CSV file, so here I have kept the link in the notebook, which you can go. You can specify the path mode. You can specify the compression separator, quotes, escape quotes, and I mean, a lot of other arguments you can specify. You can ignore the leading or trailing white space. You can change the encoding if required. And there are like a lot of different options you can play around with for the CSV. At last, I would like to show you how we can read the Parquet file. It's pretty straightforward. We have a function called as the Parquet and specify the location where our Parquet files are stored, and it will natively read that particular Parquet files and create a data frame directly with the Parquet function. Okay. Similarly, if you would like to store that, it's pretty simple. .write.parquet, specify the path where you would like to save your data as a Parquet, specify the modes. These things are pretty much, same for the other functions as well. So this will store your data frame as a Parquet file. So these are some of the data sources which you can use. However, what if we would like to read the data from a relational table, create a data frame, process the data into Spark, and then store the data again, maybe relational table or any other data format which you would like. So, here I'm displaying the example. I'm showing the example for the MySQL. However, you can use any format which represent the JDBC, which support the JDBC. As of now, I don't have any MySQL database, so I just kept the sample command. So what you can do is you can say Spark read format. Inside that, you can specify the JDBC, and then you can specify some of the options like the URL, the database table, the username, password, and you say load. Then what it will do is it will load the data from your database and create a data frame. And your JDBC URL looks something like this, like JDBC, your sub protocol, for example, MySQL or anything else, which like it's the JDBC URL for your database. So the idea is you can read the relational table into Spark, do your analysis in Spark, and again, you can pretty much similarly your save data frame to a relational database. Again, you need to specify the format as JDBC, provide the arguments like which URL, database, username, password, what's the mode you would like to use, and then say save. It will save your data frame to a relational table. Okay. And just one last bit. So what if, so we have a lot of different functions available in the Spark API, but we know that whatever is available is never suffice to our business requirements. And we always have to write some sort of UDFs. So how we can write the UDFs in Spark and use it. So here is a very simple Python function where I'm just inputting a month, and based on that month, I'm just returning a quarter. So this is a very simple function to determine the quarter. And here, what I'm doing is I'm registering this particular Python function as a UDF. So we have a function called as a UDF, which takes an argument, which is the name of the function, here the determine quarter, and the second argument is the data type or the return type. So here we are returning a string. So if I execute this, now this quarter is nothing but a UDF. Now how we can use this particular UDF? So we will use our customer data frame. We will select certain columns, and then we will create another column named as a quarter using the function quarter, and we will pass this birth month function. So based on this month function, it will return a quarter using the UDF which we have created. Let's try to execute this and see how it works. So for the month 12, the quarter 4, the month 4 is quarter 2, month 9 is quarter 3, and so on, which means that it is working fairly well. So this is how we have created a derived column, but based on the UDF. Okay. So this is where I would like to conclude my session. But before I hand over to David, I would like to share some of the more resources which could be useful. So the first link is the official documentation for the Spark. This is for the PySpark. Similarly, you can find for the Scala, Java, and the other APIs as well. And also, I would like to share one of my blog, which I have published, which is corresponding to today's session, where I discuss about the data frames. And pretty much like I have covered everything what we discussed in today's session as well. And it also has a link at the end to my GitHub repo, where you can find this particular notebook as well if you are interested. And also, apart from this particular blog, I would also like to share some of the other blogs as well, which you might be interested. So let me just another screen. So this is one of the blog which I have written on the array functions. So for example, if you have multiple arrays, how you can work with the arrays. But here I would like to show you, I have kept the link for some of the other blogs as well, which maybe in quick couple of minutes, I would like to give you an idea. So this is the blog, which is corresponding to our today's session, which is data frame. The next one is talk about a little more advanced topic of the data frames. So the broadcast join, how you can improve the performance with the broadcast join, the caching, persisting, how you can write the SQL expressions and execute that, how you can create a UDF, which we have discussed, how to work with the null values, and talk about a bit of partitioning as well. And at the end, I will finish this blog with the catalog API, which will allow you to play around with the metadata of the Spark. Apart from that, I have written an entire blog on the datetime function. This contains all the datetime functions available at when I wrote this particular blog with sample statements and output. So it will be easy for you to follow and understand how a particular datetime function looks like. This is another blog to work with the JSON if you are interested in working with the JSON and create a data frame, and how you can play around with the JSON, how you can work with the JSON with Spark. And this is for the Windows functions. So if you have, if you would like to work with the window function, so I have put some examples and code here, which you can go through it as per your pace and see how a particular window function works. With Spark, and obviously then there is one last one, which is the array. So if you have instead of a particular value, if you have arrays, so how you can work with those array values which are present into the columns. So most of these functions were released with Spark 2.4. So they are, fairly recent, but you can find this blog. And if you're interested, you can probably go through it. So, with this, I would like to, conclude this session. I hope you have enjoyed the session. I would like to hand over to David for any questions we might have.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Neeraj. Yeah, we've had a few questions come in, which is good. So we'll fire through those as well. We'd just like to say it was really nice to have that type of session where people would normally be paying for a half-day workshop to go through what we've covered in the last couple of weeks. So we're really lucky to have you give up your time. So thank you very much from me. First question, actually, it's a nice, easy one. You answered it just there. Question from Sean. Thanks for a great demo. Is there a link to the GitHub repo? So we've covered that one off, Sean, just there. Neeraj, if you could just open up the questions tab in your Zoom software just at the same time, it will probably help to read as I am. The top question there is probably a good starting point. Question coming from Hari Krishna. How is Spark data frame different from Pandas data frame? And why would you choose Spark data frame?
Yes, that's a very good question. So conceptually, if you look at the Pandas data frame or even the R data frame, from the structure it looks similar because it's a relational representation of your data. But Spark is a distributed framework. So first of all, you get the capabilities of your distributed framework. You get the capabilities of in-memory computing capability, because when you are running your Spark data frame, under the hood, you're running your Spark job. Also, Spark provides a lot of optimization under the hood, which we need not to worry about, which will be done automatically. So that's the difference between working with the Spark data frame, and I would say why we choose the Spark data frame. So if you're working on a big data, probably, after a certain point of time, your Pandas data frame might not respond, because that's not a distributed. You can't run your operations in parallel, which probably you can do with the Spark data frame.
Perfect. Thank you very much. We'll fire down a couple of questions actually now, Neeraj. Question from Adi Adua. It's kind of, similar sort of lines actually. So Adi was asking, what is your general advice in switching from the Spark RDD and native Python Pandas data frame? Do you have any pointers on best practices for better performance and software design when you switch between RDD and Pandas data frame?
Okay, so I think Pandas data frame I have already covered in the first question. With respect to the RDDs, so the data frames built on the top of RDDs. However, it is not advisable, or I would say, it is advisable to use the data frame if we can, because data frame provides a lot of different optimizations on the top of RDDs. And in terms of the performance, data frame performs, when I say data frame, I'm talking about by default Spark data frame. So Spark data frame performs better than the RDDs. So, I would suggest to, start with the Spark data frame, and that will give you a better performance as compared to the RDDs.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you very much. Next question we go to is from Sam. Sam's question was that you mentioned that EMPDF is immutable. Is that true? In Pandas data frames can normally be mutated. Is it a feature of Spark that data frames are no longer mutable?
To answer this question, yes, the Spark data frames are immutable, so you cannot change them because they're built on the top of RDDs, and in turn the RDDs are immutable.
Thank you very much. We're going to skip down to the question now from Daniel Andrada. He says, first of all, thank you for the presentation. Have you ever used Dask? What are the main differences?
Sorry, Daniel, I haven't used Dask, so maybe I might not be able to answer.
Straightforward answer that one, mate. Perfect. Next question's from Mark. He's asking, is there still lazy evaluation when using Spark data frames?
Yes, absolutely, because that's fundamental for the operations, and it's still the lazy. For example, if you have read the data and then do a select, filter, and a few other operations, so it won't fail. Maybe things might fail. Either you try to save that to some storage or do a show, because that's where your Spark job will be triggered. So yes, the short answer is yes, it's still lazy evaluation.
Next question from Vinod. I'm not sure if this was perhaps covered in the demo, but it might just be worth recapping. He was asking how to establish a connection between Spark and Hive. In your example, you read the customer table from Hive. How was that connection established, basically?
Generally, like when we are working on the clusters, this has already been established by, your admins. But if not, then like some of the configuration you need to make in order to make that connection established. So maybe your admin can help on that side, but it's pretty straightforward, and generally it's natively available.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to shoot down a couple of questions from Richard Dunn to finish. Actually, we've fired through these questions really quickly, which is good to see. Richard was asking, in terms of the SQL statements that you're running, how complex, long can the SQL statements be, considering some of your pipelines can be hundreds of lines of code long?
So you can write the hundreds of lines of SQL statement, if you like. However, I would suggest at that point of time, instead of writing 100 lines of SQL, break down using the data frame API. So let's say select something, create a new data frame, then do a filtering and bunch of operations, so that you know that what the workflow is, and it will be easy for you to debug as well. But if you like to write the 100 lines of SQL, yes, it will it will work absolutely fine. And depending on how much data you are pulling, probably you need the resources accordingly.
Perfect. Thank you very much. And again, final question of the session is also from Richard. He's basically asking around, you know, how complete is the sequel? Does it conform to all ANSI standards?
I'm not really too sure about, I mean, like the all ANC standard, but like whatever my experience is, like pretty much, I mean, we can use almost everything what we have, I mean, the typical SQL, which could be used by the data analyst. So yeah, but maybe you can just go through the official documentation, which I've shared the link, and maybe you might find this answer for regarding the standards.
Perfect. Awesome. Thank you very much. I know we've had you turn off your camera because we're a bit worried about network issues, but I feel like to say thank you at the end, if you don't mind. It'd be good to fire your camera back up again, man, and mate, say, you know, thank you very much. It's been two great sessions. There's still comments coming into the chat, into the Q&A, saying how much everyone's enjoyed it. So yeah, from me and the rest of the community, you know, thank you very much, Neeraj. And is there any final comment from you before we leave the session for the day?
So first of all, I would like to I mean, thank you and everybody for joining for the session and taking out your time. I mean, I really enjoyed in the I mean these two sessions, and I hope whatever the time you have invested along with us, I mean, we have made some sense, and I hope you have learned something out of it. So thanks everybody for taking your time and joining these sessions.
Even as you were saying that, we had another 15 comments come into the chat from different people saying thank you. So it's clearly gone very well, mate. So I'm sure we'll be keeping in touch, and we'll have you back at some point in the future. It would be great. So yeah, thanks again once again. Just final thing from me, as mentioned at the start, we are announcing a whole series of events from the 1st of October. The tickets will be going live, and we'll be running the festival through the whole month of November. So do keep an eye out for that, and please share it with your friends, colleagues, family, anybody else that you think might be relevant. So thank you very much, everybody, and we'll be back very shortly with some more events soon. Thanks again, Neeraj.
Yeah, thank you. Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.